Hi, welcome to another SwiftUI Group Lab, or as we like to call it, SwiftUI After Dark. My name's Kurt, and I'm part of the Worldwide Developer Relations team here at Apple. I'm joined by engineers and leaders from the UI Frameworks team. Anna, Stephen, Nick, Russell, and Sam. In addition to those on screen, there's a team behind the scenes helping with the triage of all your inbound questions. We're excited to answer your questions tonight about all things SwiftUI and UI frameworks. If you have a code-specific question or somehow we can't get to your question today, please bring your questions to the developer forum at developer.apple.com/forums, where we can continue the discussion. If you have a bug or a feature request, go to feedbackassistant.apple.com. We'll focus on questions tonight that will help the broadest audience. So, without further ado, let's get to questions. And I'd like to start things off by just hearing from each of you about what parts of SwiftUI you work on. Maybe, Sam, you can get us started?
Sure. So before this world, I did a lot of work in programming languages. And so as a sort of natural consequence of that, I work on things that are like at the intersection of Swift and SwiftUI, because that's sort of where my interests lie. So if you've seen like some of the type checking performance work that we announced this year, I'm very involved in that and anything else where we're thinking about like how do we use Swift in really interesting ways.
I actually worked on UIKit for most of my time here. But I worked on animations there and the interop between that and SwiftUI, and then like the bridging parts of SwiftUI a little bit.
Nice. Nick?
I did a stint in AppKit. I did a little bit of work in UIKit, and now I'm a manager on SwiftUI. So when I do get to write code, I'm sometimes in presentations with Sheet and some of the containers like Inspector, Navigation, dabble in controls. And then this year, spent a little bit of time in Dataflow.
Oh, nice. And Stephen?
So before SwiftUI, I was an engineer on the Apple Music team doing SwiftUI development on the app side. And now my focus is on SwiftUI performance and also the agentic coding skills that we introduced this year.
Nice. And Anna?
Yeah, I work on mostly navigation, bars, tabs. Effectively, if it's touching the way that someone is navigating your app, that's something that I work on. And I get to work on it with Nick.
Nice. Excellent. And before I became part of the Worldwide Developer Relations team, I also worked on presentations and navigation. In fact, Russell and I shared an office, which was great. So let's go to some questions from the forum. So the first question is, with over 1 million reorderable items, for each doesn't render every view, but still traverses the whole collection on first display and every count or order change, causing slowdowns. UIKit's diffable data source has the same issue. Only a classic data source helps. What can we do about this in SwiftUI? You want to take a stab at it, Stephen?
Yeah, so this is actually an issue that we're looking into and that we're aware of. It definitely shouldn't be working in that way. And the best thing to do is to file a feedback in order for us to keep track of it.
And it's I should say when we're asking for feedback, it's not so much that we need to be aware of the issue, like we know there are issues, as Stephen said, but we want to know your particular use case. So why do you need to display that many items in a list? What's the nature of your data that causes that to be sort of the structure that you're building up? So that's the sort of thing we look for in feedback reports, is tell us what you're trying to accomplish, so we can make sure the APIs support your use cases.
And bravo to this developer for downloading the betas and testing them out. Like every day I get to work right now and I come in and see what feedbacks are coming in from developers. They're very visible to us. We take a look at them. We've already gotten a couple on state macro as well. And so we're fixing the bugs, and when you get them in early, we get to look at them pretty quickly.
Yeah. Totally the best time to file feedback that will influence the next release is right now. So our next question, let's see, Anna, I think I'll let you take a crack at this one first. So in iOS 27, at least beta 1, it's not possible to create a custom transition. The protocol navigation transition is publicly empty. What is the purpose of this protocol, and is there anything we can do to make our own?
Yeah, so that is effectively like a way for SwiftUI to expose things that, conform to the protocol so they can be like navigation transitioning. Like this is something that, in SwiftUI, sometimes you will see like either like protocols or like also styles that will give you the pieces to be able to do your own, like for example, like a button style, but there are other ones that maybe expose concrete members. So like you can make a zoom navigation transition, but they may not necessarily, at least right now, expose a way to do it to create your own custom one.
Right.
So kind of unfortunately going back to the last one, but if you're able to file a feedback with your use case, we'd be really curious about the kinds of things you're trying to build because it helps us know also, what are the pieces that you might need in order to be able to build your own custom navigation transition.
Right. Yeah. So we've got crossfade transition and zoom transition and automatic as the sort of the trifecta today.
But one of the ones that I'm actually quite excited about this year, which is a very sleeper, but any navigation transition, which means you can switch between the two of them, which is something that you weren't able to do before. Nice. So like having that dynamism is nice.
Cool.
And that crossfade one applies to sheets too, so you can do some pretty cool things
That's
with
cool. I
it.
didn't know.
Zoom as well.
Oh yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, so the API is composed, right? So when you say navigation transition, we name that specifically because there was a lot of back and forth on what that should be called: presentation transition, navigation transition. But we named it navigation transition because navigation was kind of the unifying concept. Like sheets are navigation. So another fun thing, just when you're making these transitions, there's no like SwiftUI first class API for custom transitions in the sense that the UI kit one exists. But it's also quite fun and easy to build like custom transitions for your own SwiftUI views if they're not on top of a navigation stack. So you can drive the animation yourself, and SwiftUI gives you all sorts of modifiers to flex the shape, and you can even use shaders. And so if it doesn't strictly have to be pushing onto a navigation stack, it's quite a lot of fun to build your own kind of transitions.
Yeah, SwiftUI animations are really powerful, like especially with animatable, and you can have like keyframe-based animations. There's some crazy stuff you can do.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. So, Stephen, I'm going to send this next question your direction. With coding intelligence and agentic models in Xcode, what are some ways we can implement it in building views with liquid glass, for example? I guess let's talk about that more generally instead of diving into the specifics about it, and then we can maybe double back to the specifics.
Yeah, so the new skills that are shipping with Xcode are a really good way to get some additional insight, especially into new APIs and best practices. And we would definitely like to get feedback on the skills as well. The tools that are built into Xcode are really good for rendering previews of liquid glass also. So iterating on the various pieces of the design to kind of get things looking the way that you want them to look is a really good way to sort of work your way towards the outcome that you're trying to get. And the skills are usable with the model of your choice as well, which is great. So, if the results vary from model to model, there's an opportunity there to experiment with kind of trying to iterate with that.
Right.
As a reminder also about these, all these skills are built into like Xcode's agentic workflows, and they work really great there. But if you use something outside of that, like some other agentic system, whatever it is, you can always export all of these skills. There's a command, I forget exactly what it is, but it's listed in what's new.
It's in what's new, and in modernizing your UI kit app as well.
Yeah. So you can like grab those skills and use them elsewhere. And also, they're fun to read through. There's a lot of really like cool tidbits in there for humans too, and like obviously targeted at LLMs, but that doesn't mean like people can't learn from them.
Yeah.
Also.
So the second part of this question is about using the glass effect modifier on buttons to apply a glass effect, and I want to take a second talk a little bit about what's in the human interface guidelines and what we've seen in the various workshops we've done around the world about adoption of the new design. When you put buttons in toolbars in the navigation bar, the top toolbar, they'll take on the appropriate glass appearance automatically. And so the glass effect is really for stuff that is not appearing in those locations. And in general, we would encourage people to not use liquid glass inside the content area of the view. You think of the glass control layer as sort of hugging the content layer, and the content layer underneath is flat. Because if there's not any content scrolling underneath the glass effect really isn't providing any benefit. There's nothing for it to refract. It's just static. And so think about whether you actually need glass effect in some of these cases. Often the simpler design is actually better in the content area.
I'm going to take a dangerous venture down trying to describe controls. I don't work too frequently in controls, so Frank, please correct me if you're watching. But glass, if you're trying to put glass on a button specifically, there is API for that, I'm pretty sure. So
There's a glass button style.
yeah, you want glass button style or glass prominent. I think FaceTime uses glass prominent, where they've got that green button in there. That's like this is the button. This is the magic one. So yeah, you can use it to good effect there. And one error I see people making, because it's very natural to do, is to reach for glass effect. You're like, oh, button, glass effect. And that, alluding to the question, that will get you a button on glass, but it won't look exactly right. So you probably want button glass effect. And then on top of that, you want button border shape. A lot of times you want button border shape to like make it a circle or a triangle.
Yeah, and the other thing I will say is like if you're
Stop
a
talking.
triangle.
A capsule.
Warning
Yeah, capsule.
button,
Capsule. Yeah, warning. There we go. They're
Important
trying
buttons.
to-
Yeah. Fix all your warnings.
We're going to hear about this one. Anna, you had something useful to add.
The other thing I will add, though, on top of like when to use liquid glass, is reminder that if you put like a button in a toolbar item, like that will already have a glass background. So like you don't need to add one on top of that. And if you want it to take on a color like a prominent glass button might, you can just use a tint.
Can you put content not on glass in the toolbar?
Yes, you can. So you use, I believe it's the, oh goodness,
It's shared
background. Yes.
hidden
Yeah.
true.
Shared background, hidden true.
A lot of debate went into that one as well.
Yes.
We think a lot about names of things.
And the main case for the hiding the glass background, for example, you can see this in the Books app. It shows a profile photo of the current person who's logged in, and putting glass around and behind a photo of a person actually doesn't look great, and so this causes that to be flat and not have the glass treatment over the top.
But we have something for that now, don't we?
Yeah, we do have something that makes it a little bit easier to make kind of like the padding and other things look
nice.
good in that case. So, because one thing that can look kind of cool is if you have like a little glass refraction around the edge. Like you don't have a huge piece of glass, but you have like just enough to kind of reflect, but it's mostly the profile photo. And we've added API this year so that you can remove that content margin that normally toolbar buttons will add around the edge.
So the refraction's right at the edge of the
Yeah.
photo.
Yeah.
Super cool.
Because removing the background used to be the only way to remove that padding. It removed both, and then your view could take up the whole space, and so it would look the same size as like the other buttons. But now you can remove just the padding and leave the background and keep your image inside. And even if it filled, then it can fill it. And then you get the rim, and it's like still made of glass, which then also means it mitoses better when you like push and pop. Like it,
nice.
because the mitosis like looks more natural if everything is glass.
Yep.
So it's like. It all looks much better now. I want all of the avatars to have like
Mitosis,
glass.
for those who haven't had a biology class recently, is when the shapes sort of blob together or blob apart. It's like they have this sort of liquid, really cool effect.
Yes.
Also called slurp.
Schlurp,
internally.
yes, also called slurp. I believe slurp is the technical term, which is why we tend to stick with mitosis, which is a lot easier to remember.
Yes, it's so easy.
So the next question, I think I'll start with you, Russell, and then Anna, you might be interested in jumping in also, or Nick. There's lots of us who have interests here. But we'll start with Russell. So what's the best way to manage screen sizes now in our apps? With vertical and resizable and split views and all the different sizes that screens can take now, the resizable simulator, like what API should we think about using as Windows to handle Windows resizing?
Definitely. So one, if you're hard coding for specific window sizes, don't do that. That's been a losing battle for a long time. Really, just if you can lay out at any size, you should be able to do that. And then look at size classes. I think we're leaning like even more into them than we were before. And I think of them as kind of defining different experiences. So at regular size classes, you get kind of your full like iPad or Mac like multi-column experience, and in compact sizes, either vertically compact or horizontally compact, then you get a more like you're constrained in that environment, so you just want to display less. And sometimes that means just changing your number of columns, and sometimes it's much more dramatically changing your app.
Right.
But if you lean into size classes, you should be okay.
Yeah, but remember that just supporting size classes isn't fully sufficient, right? Like, Windows can be many different sizes that like go in between where you'd want those size class transitions. So make sure that you're dealing with true flexibility, right?
Yeah.
In addition to doing like different UI looks and feels per size class.
Yeah, I mean, I will also say, like, using system containers, if that's like an option for your app, can be really nice because then we're the ones doing the work for you to have to support that.
Yeah.
But the other thing I will plug is something that, I don't know, I feel like it's just layouts in SwiftUI are also really cool and really powerful. There's a good WWDC talk from
22.
Yeah, from 22 on that.
Using custom layouts. It's we're all thinking, oh yeah, that's Paul's talk. Internally we all think of who gave the talk because we know these people, and turns out the stuff very helpful to those of you who are trying to find them.
Title, Paul's talk.
Yeah, but it is the session on building custom layouts in SwiftUI.
Yeah, because like one thing that people I think is something that people will reach for is like doing an if statement off of size class. And the thing that can be like not great about doing that is when it changes, it'll tear down the view on the other side. So you lose all your state, or you have to do a ton of work to make it so that the state is like synced on either side. And that can just be hard to manage.
Right.
So like the nice thing about a layout is like if you're genuinely like changing like the position of the views and like they're like flexibly resizing, then you don't have to like throw away that state.
Also, a plug for while we're here, custom containers. Like the combination of custom layouts and custom containers is a really great way to make super flexible, reusable controls that can like have all of these adaptations to different size classes, different layouts, like all sorts of different things.
And demystify SwiftUI containers from WWDC24.
Fantastic.
Matt's talk is a good one to go to for that.
Yeah.
I think we're all talking about like different ways to maintain structural view identity. And the one that we almost hit was like the any layout as well. So if you're really doing something custom, but you want a custom layout in compact, and then you want a different layout in regular, you can use any layout, and all of those views will maintain their structural identity. And the any layout wraps each of those other. It's any layout, right? Is it called any layout?
I think it is.
Yeah. And it wraps. It can switch between those two layouts, and so
It can animate between them too. It's
you can,
very cool.
With all the structure is
And you can use the system ones too.
Yeah.
Yeah. The another couple of things to think about in this space. View that fits is handy. You want to not use view that fits in a whole bunch of views at once because it has to measure subsequent or successive views to find
Got to figure out which one fits.
one that
Yeah,
fits.
and it literally like
right
tries
in the
them
name.
all and says
Yeah.
like which of you fits in this container. Yeah.
But it can be at a higher level. It can be super handy for that. The other thing that I would plug is I think tab views are great for this. 2 releases ago, to be iOS 18 and aligned releases, we Anna really built tab views that are along with others, tab views that are adaptive and can have a sidebar at regular size classes, and that's optionally collapsible, and they have all kinds of configuration options, and that's a really nice container that adapts nicely to narrow compact size classes like on the phone with just the tabs, or to larger ones. And so I think that's a great container view that's maybe less appreciated than it should be on larger devices.
One question though, a lot of people will, you think, okay, I need to respond to sizes. I want to use a geometry reader. I was wondering, like, Steven, can you talk a little bit more about like when to think about using a geometry reader, or like what the performance implications are, and like how, if an app is thinking, I need to do something a little more precise, like what they might want to think about when they're doing that?
Yeah, so I'm actually a big fan of on-geometry change, specifically because I feel like most of the use cases where people are trying to react to size changes for things like resizing grid items, for instance. What they really want is like breakpoints for their various sizes. Like if the view is like wider than 320, then I want to have like this particular layout for my cell. And if it's like in this range, then I want to have another kind of layout. And the nice thing about on geometry change is that it actually has 2 closures. The first one is the one that actually gets the real-time geometry information that fires on every frame. But then whatever you return from that is the thing that actually actually determines whether the action gets called. So basically, like if you had a range, where you're saying like 320 to 480, like I want to use this size, then you can specify that logic, and then you like only need to relay out or change things when you actually cross over those various thresholds.
So you take something that's running at frame rate, and suddenly it just fires twice as you cross the thresholds.
Right. Like typically, if I were on an older release using a geometry reader, I would really only do it in a background view for the most part, because putting things inside of a geometry reader, it ends up being really expensive for the views that are like subviews of the closure for that geometry reader. In general, on geometry change is going to be a better tool to reach for.
Awesome.
Yeah, basically you don't want your views to be invalidating on every single frame.
Right, and for things where you're trying to do like more complex stuff, where you have like the bounds and then want to do like very specific placements, and I mentioned like custom layouts, that's the tool I would go to there. So like the combination of on geometry change and custom layouts is going to get you so far.
And there's a super cool thing in the talk on advanced graphics in SwiftUI this year, Hao Qian's talk. He has this such a good explanation of alignment guides, and has this really neat example where he uses alignment guides to do something that I would have thought you could only do with a custom layout. But his explanation of it is just so neat, what you can achieve with that, and it's super efficient. It's like layout once and it's done.
Alignment guides are so powerful and so underused.
Yeah.
It's like that layout once thing that just kind of made me think of something that with on geometry change, it's still even like the couple times that it fires, like even if your condition mostly means it doesn't fire very much, but the second closure, the only thing you can really do in there is still set some state or something. So this whole system will take at a minimum of like 2 passes to lay out. It's like one initial one and then one additional one. Once you change that state, it needs to like run again. Whereas with like a custom layout, you can really lay everything out in one pass.
So the next question, I think we'll start with you on this one, Sam.
Sure.
The developer asks, any tips on how to properly learn data management and passing data between views in SwiftUI? Are there good projects that would help us like strengthen our skills in that, or how should we like increase our knowledge there?
It's a really good question. Like the at its core, at least in my mind, data management in SwiftUI is really like making pieces of information and then trying to make your views as lightweight as possible, such that they map that information to like view data. So honestly, my biggest recommendations in terms of like getting good at structuring that is like even just like building like self-contained like state machines and logical components that you can use all throughout your app to drive things. And then anytime you see that like your view code is getting messy, trying to like sort of bridge things back and forth, try to see if that means you can like pare down that like model or logic layer data, so that it only has the things that it needs. I harp a lot on like the fact that SwiftUI is like very architecture agnostic, and the reason for that isn't like, there's no like we don't want to like make a choice. It's that we think like there isn't one correct choice, and it really depends on the shape of the data for your specific app. So as far as learning goes, I'd say just like build a lot of things that are trying to model very different kinds of data, and you'll quickly find you'll need like very different patterns for each one of those cases to map them nicely onto views.
Yeah, I mean the thing I think about there is it's helpful to build sample apps in a domain that you're familiar with, right? So build an app for something that you care about. Maybe it's keeping track of your watercolor paints, or how often you have to feed your fish, or whatever it is that you really care about, because then you're solving a problem that you have, so you're motivated to work on it, and you understand the data, and so you're not spending brain cycles trying to figure out what the data is about. You're just spending it on trying to solve the problem. I think one of the challenges of like going through a canned tutorial that is about something someone else is excited about is you have to learn what they're excited about and what you're doing in your tutorial.
Problem I run into all the time. Yeah, it turns out people don't want to look at my apps about like floor tiles. I try to just not good sample code to look through different terrazzo patterns. People aren't into that.
You just need to find someone who like has your same interest in floor tiles.
I will say that
Still looking.
I'm also a big fan of using instruments for this. Not necessarily like people typically use instruments for debugging performance, but the SwiftUI instrument is actually really powerful because it shows you a timeline of all of the things that are being updated, so you can actually understand how the places that you're updating your data are affecting, which view bodies are running, and sort of it can kind of show you how the data is flowing through your app in that way as well. And you can also see the work that SwiftUI is doing as a result of the changes that you're making to your data. And that can kind of help you understand how things work and how stuff flows. Yeah.
I've also been peddling dynamic property to all who will listen this year because I finally learned the power of dynamic property. And it's hard to explain on a panel, but a lot of the times on change is very helpful in a pinch. But as your views grow and you have lots and lots of on changes, a good rule of thumb that I like, any on change can probably be replaced by a good usage of dynamic property. And then going back to Russell's point, that also saves you an extra render cycle because on chain or dynamic properties, their update method is called right before body. And so you take what was an update of the on change, updating state, and then re-rendering the view, and you move that into the dynamic property updates and the view renders, and you're done.
Yeah.
So that's
Anytime you have like any kind of on change or like action-based closure and some extra state, you're like incurring, both like extra memory to store that state, but then like extra time to process that.
Yeah, that's a great point. We had a question in the previous SwiftUI lab, which was about sort of anti-patterns, and on change isn't always the wrong move, but sometimes I'll be like looking at code in a workshop or something, and a developer will be using on change in order to do a bunch of calculations and then update some piece of state, and it's sort of like trying to get back to imperative code and do the work there. And ideally, you'd have a data model that's doing that work, and it's just vending the new value as the other values of that data model change, and you make it observable, it updates efficiently. So there are cases where on change makes sense because you have to broadcast to some external system or whatever. But if you're using on change to mutate the state of the view, that's almost always not the right move.
Yeah, I see a lot of people in various forums saying like, oh, X API is bad or whatever it is, like you shouldn't use it. Generally, if we shipped an API, it's because we think like it is useful and like,
stinky one.
Yeah, like, on change, any view are things that I hear a lot of people saying like, oh, they're, spooky, you don't touch them. But I wouldn't so much put it that way. I would say when you see uses of APIs like that, it's a sign that you should like look critically and make sure that the usage is justified. Like for any view, are you actually erasing the type of the view? Are you using like a heterogeneous collection, or are you just like wanting to make it easy instead of thinking through the generics? And for on change, like are you actually doing something reactive and that needs to be in like an imperative breakout point, or are you just using this to like plumb things through that you otherwise could use the environment or a dynamic property or something else to better model?
We haven't mentioned on appear, and I feel like that's even more more common than on change actually. And this is my favorite use case for dynamic property, which is that commonly if you're loading something like an image, there's the possibility that you'll already have it in your cache. And in that case, you don't want to wait until on appear to load your image, because you're basically going to be guaranteed to have a full re-render of your view, even if the image was already available. And so because the update method of a dynamic property fires before the body renders, you can actually turn a dynamic property into a property wrapper and vend the cached value if you have it, and then it's available to the body on its first run, and then you don't have to do that round trip, and that can make a really big difference.
And there's a great example of that in the talk this year at WWDC on lazy stacks. So Renz talks about how you can actually, it's this exact example, how you can move that loading earlier in the process. And SwiftUI is smart enough that like it can instantiate a view, it can process the layout, and then it can do the rendering in separate frames. And so as you're scrolling and a view's about to come on screen, if we can have it all laid out before it gets there, can render super fast and you avoid glitching when you scroll. It's super cool. And the talk is so good. I just love it.
It is a really good talk. There are a lot of depth in that talk.
Yeah.
While we're here and on appear, my favorite feature of the year What?
That rhymes. The poet.
Nick is dropping some rhymes on late night.
This is
Clear.
it's really subtle, but it was a lot of attention to detail paid by one of the engineers on the team to take advantage of new Swift concurrency features to make task and onAppear have the same timing. So there was this really subtle behavioral difference where if you stack like a task and an onAppear on a view, so you have view.task.onAppear, the onAppear would fire first because the task incurred an isolation hop. And now that doesn't happen with the latest Swift concurrency features, and so they'll execute top down.
Nice.
Which is a nice like ordering improvement.
Awesome. So the next one, who should I throw this at? I think we'll start with Russell because he raised his eyebrows at me.
No. Let's go.
And feel free to bounce it to someone else if you don't want it. So developer asks, I've heard in multiple places, including the last two SwiftUI group labs this week, that I shouldn't be
repeat
using if to conditionally hide elements. So what's Apple's recommendation? And part of why I love this question is the example that was provided. So for example, only at 9:41 should I show that it's 9:41. Otherwise, I shouldn't show something.
It's always nice.
Somebody pays attention to their Apple demos.
Yeah,
It's always 9:41 somewhere in Apple Park.
in Apple Park. Yeah.
If you wanted to show 9:41 only at 9:41, then the best thing would be to add like an opacity modifier or whatever transition you wanted, which is part of why I love animations. Is like one of the things I've worked on for so many years because the animations often inform much more than just what happens when it moves. They can inform the structure of the whole thing you're building. Anyway, back to 9:41. If you wanted to fade in and out at that time, just use an opacity with a conditional in that modifier and have it be 1 at 9:41 and 0 at any other time. So then it's always there, but it disappears at the other times. Now, if you need to like actually remove it from your layout so that it like doesn't take up space, I might bop to see who else has a good suggestion for how to handle that.
If you're doing something like that, then it is fine to conditionalize it, right? Like if you're actually removing the view and putting it back in, right? Then you're gonna have to do new layout and all these things. The reason to avoid doing that is we don't want to have to reflow layout and reinitialize state and things like that if the view's not actually going away and reappearing. It's just like visually changing like with opacity. But if it really is being removed from the hierarchy and not just like hidden, then yeah, that's the time to reach.
But what about in view modifiers, like conditionals for the content of a view modifier, for instance, like where people like if you had a 941 view modifier and like inside it was like like if 941 content.overlay your text, otherwise just content. What are the implications of that?
So, I mean, for conditionalizing view modifiers, right? Generally, you want to make sure the view modifiers take arguments such that like you can pass in an argument that will do nothing, and you see that with a lot of hopefully most of our modifiers, where like there'll be like a value that we consider inert, as in it will do nothing.
Just like 1 was for opacity.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like if you call opacity 1 on something, it doesn't modify the content at all. And you want to be putting like the conditional expression, not like an if statement, inside of the arguments to the modifier.
And one of the challenges, and we see it all the time, is if a conditional is inside the body of a view modifier, then that view modifier gets applied all over the place, and you just made those views relay out. And as the person applying the modifier, you don't really know that you're doing that. It's like
And if it happens upstream, you're very confused.
Right.
Yeah, if you ever see the pattern of like making an if modifier that like basically is just a modifier around a conditional branch, it's really dangerous for exactly that reason. You can end up with like all sorts of conditionals in places you don't expect them, and that can cause like state to get reset because if you switch a conditional branch, you lose state because it's a new view. So you want to be very careful with that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Just go ahead.
No, please.
Just like an interesting pattern when you're designing modifier APIs is sometimes you have the inert one because it makes sense, and then there are other SwiftUI modifiers that won't have an inert version, and that's not an oversight. It's more so in the spirit of that particular API. So like certain styles are static in that you pass a type to them that's generic and that binds to that modifier, and so you can't change that. And that's kind of intentional because SwiftUI uses that static information to render more efficiently. And so switching styles like that on the fly is something that you might want to do. Like if you really need to do that, that's more of an if-else type of thing.
I think the place where it came up earlier in the week about avoiding if in particular was an if statement at the top level of a view that's in like a lazy stack or a for each. Because in that case, SwiftUI is counting the number of views. It's identifying the views and position based on how many there are. And if a view is like scrolled out of the screen, but it had a conditional at the top level of it, we don't know whether that view should be there or not. And so we have to keep it around so that we can tell whether the conditional state changed. And so, again, Renz talks about that in the Lazy Stacks video this year. But that's a case where, if you really do need that conditional, you should maybe wrap the whole thing in a stack so that there's always a view there and it's empty sometimes. That sort of thing.
To provide a little additional clarity on that, since it can be hard to get a mental model for these things, the problem case for like lazy containers like list and lazy stack is when you have a view that could resolve to multiple subviews. So if you just wrote like a view builder text, if instead you wrap that whole thing in a VStack, right? Now that VStack is one resolved view, so you're always going to get one view out of it. And the same advice applies for things like any view. Any view conceptually can have any type under the hood. So it could produce one view, it could produce 10 views.
Custom layout is the same.
Yeah, exactly. So if you have any of those things, if you wrap them in a unary container like a VStack or some layout, you'll be guaranteed to always produce one view, and then you'll get the fast path for those lazy containers.
But if you just make your own view type, that doesn't do that, right?
Yeah.
Like if you return something from body and
No,
it's not.
that is, you can return multiple views from body. So
Exactly.
Right.
And that's still multiple views.
And that's still
Pay very
multiple
close
views.
attention
Still
to
multiple
people
views.
talking
Right.
about
And
this
like
topic.
group is like that as well. It doesn't flatten.
And there's a reason for that, right? Like you could imagine you'd make a custom view that you want to be able to pass to a list and have it expand out to multiple list rows instead of just like one list row that's surrounded in like a stack or something like that.
Right.
So that's important functionality, and it's very intentional, but you have to be careful about it when working with lazy containers.
Yeah, well, the other like data flow thing that I think not as like people, if you've been developing in SwiftUI, I think most people have heard of the environment, but I think something that people have sometimes heard about less are preferences and traits, which can flow upward. And the other thing is traits are accessible to kind of like your surrounding container. And so if
By
you put
traits,
it,
you mean container values? Yeah.
yes, container values. Sorry, thank
No,
you.
you're good.
More naming.
More naming.
More naming, yeah.
Container values. So they're accessible to your surrounding container. So the one thing to know is if you're, wrapping something in a container like a VStack, that will mean that like a container outside of it can't read those container values. So that might be desirable or that might not be, but that is one thing to like take a look at when you're debugging.
And that actually, both of these last two things, the counting the number of views that a view actually expands to and the container values API are covered in that demystify containers session from 24, which is it's super cool. It's also karaoke themed. So
It is.
Sam
We
and
love,
I are
we
on
love
board.
karaoke.
The next one I'm going to throw to you, Sam, and this is a bit of a segue. You mentioned any view in that conversation. We moved on from it, but let's go back to it. What's the concrete cost of type erasing with any view if it's in a deeply nested or frequently updating view? Like, when should I worry about it? When should I not?
So, you know how I mentioned with like the if-else case, right? Like it's sometimes you need to like switch the view that you're showing, and then that's okay. With any view, in general, there are places where you need to type erase views, right? It could just be that, at compile time, you don't know what the type of subview is going to be. And in cases like that, any view is a fine thing to reach for. The case to look out for is when the underlying type would change. Because if the underlying type were to change, like let's say it starts out as a text and then you change it to, my special view. When that change happens, just like if else, we have to sort of tear down the view hierarchy and then rebuild it, and that is not super efficient. So if you can, try to avoid changing the underlying type as much as possible, and that'll get you in good performance cases. And then the other one is exactly the thing which I was just mentioning, which is if you're in a lazy container, you need to be careful because it won't be able to tell the surrounding lazy container how many views it resolves to. As mentioned, you can resolve that by like wrapping it in a stack.
All right. So I'm going to throw this one to you, Nick, and you can throw it to someone else if you'd like. So the question is, are there any tips for making SwiftUI layouts more adaptable now that Xcode previews are resizable? We talked about this a little bit, but like, is there anything with custom layouts that maybe we should think about differently? Anything along these lines?
I'm gonna need some time to think about this. This is like an abstract question. It's kind of one of those like, give me a little more about kind of what you're doing, but
Yeah, it's tough to say without like specifics here. But
Right.
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I think you have more to say about this than I do, so I'll let you start.
I mean, I feel like when you're writing layouts, so sometimes in your app, you may be writing like a really bespoke layout, and you may have been thinking like, okay, this is going to be a particular size. Like, I know, maybe I hard-coded some things. It happens. We've done it. But it's what?
Not me.
Okay, then I'm the only one, I guess.
Perfect, and only writes amazing code.
But like the size is an input parameter. So if you've set up your layout such that you're kind of prepared to accept any size and do something that is reasonable in any of these sizes, then like you're really already well on the way. And I would probably, test that. Like you have, now a way to test that. I would kind of test it at all the different sizes, see, do you like the results that you're getting? If not, then maybe, evaluate what you're doing. But honestly, you're probably in a pretty good place if you're writing a custom layout.
Right, and that actually I think is a brilliant way to think about this. Is like, actually the question is kind of backwards.
Right.
Now that you've got resizable previews, resize your app and see what happens. Find out where you made assumptions. Find out where the layout breaks, and then go in and find where you put that magic number that causes this to break, and figure out how you need to react to it.
And also just like use your app in contexts where it is resizable, like on iPad and with
Right.
you really quickly find out when you're
mirroring.
iPhone mirroring. You really quickly find out when you're like trying to resize your app and use it, like when it doesn't quite work in certain situations, and then it's much easier to patch that stuff.
and you use other people's apps. I like to apps and websites, just resize them and see how different people deal with this. It's one of my most favorite parts of like looking at a lot of indie apps is indie developers in particular. They get to do their own, they're not bound to a product team or a design team, and so they get to be really creative with how their app adapts. And so there are a lot of apps out there that do something really special and compact, and then you wind them up and you're like, oh, this is very creative use of space. So cop-out answer. Yeah. Figure out what your app should do by looking at other apps and figuring out what you like.
Inspiration, right? Take inspiration from other apps. All right. This is a challenging one. We'll start with you on this, Anna. You might choose to throw it to Russell, because this is a topic all three of us have discussed, I think. But the question is, what's your advice for presenting full screen SwiftUI overlays on top of everything else in the app, including Sheets? Is there any way to do this that doesn't interfere with modal presentation?
Look at the wheels turning.
This is a hard question.
All three of them go into loading spinner mode.
Well, I can elaborate more, because this has come up in our workshops sometimes. A common case where people face this problem is they'll want to present a login interface over the app. And so if you're happen to get logged out because of a network disconnect or something like that, teams will want to bring up a UI over the top of the existing UI. And I'm not actually sure there's a way to accomplish that in SwiftUI.
Or I think you would have to be probably pretty coordinated about your navigation model and your
Right.
data model. Like if you're able to guarantee, like, because a full screen cover, once you've presented it, that will take up the whole screen, provided, like, kind of if you think of it as like a little like hierarchy. Like if you're at 0 and you want to present something on top of 0, and that's like a full screen cover, you're good to go. But if you have, like this question said, another modal presentation, and maybe you have another modal presentation presented, like that's going to be trickier. So I think, at least if you want to be using like SwiftUI with like the APIs currently as is, I would probably try to track the presentations and, see. But we'd also probably welcome a feedback for like your use case so we can make this better.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean,
Anything
this
to
is
add?
where I mean, if we're, I know it's a SwiftUI lab.
No, it's
you
the UI
could-
Frameworks
I
Lab
was
too.
the same
Oh.
thing. It's ultra
We
live.
love interop. We love frameworks
We
being
love,
friends.
We love frameworks. and rock.
Drop some UI window on us.
Thank you for the invitation. I feel like I feel safe saying that now. Yeah, I mean, because even in UIKit, if you had a UIKit app that was using SwiftUI at all, it's difficult to present something or to get something on top of other presentations in your app, especially if you don't have a central way to manage all your presentations and don't know if there's anything there. And so the easiest way maybe to drop down to UIKit, and you can make a new UI window if you're using like UIKit's scene lifecycle. Then you have access to the scene, and you can init it with a scene, and you can position it on top of things. And so if you have like a HUD or like a very specific use case that really needs to be over something, then like you can drop down and do that. And you can put SwiftUI in there, so you could make its root view controller a UI hosting controller, and then do anything you want. And it probably wouldn't be so bad. It should work.
Yeah, no,
there's plenty of
does.
people doing.
I've hacked it together.
Yeah,
For years and years and years.
it does then kind of lead you into another area where, well, what if something wants to draw on top of that?
Right.
I do find this way of thinking can sometimes feel like, well, I'm the number one thing. Of course, this thing should always be on top of everything, which is true until you think of something else that needs to be on top of everything. And you have to think about which
Or a
of those two
person
things
on
wins.
your team who didn't know that you thought your view needed
Right.
to be on top comes along.
Right. And then, and if you don't, I think it'll be last UI window wins. So if you have two teammates making UI windows, then whichever one is last wins, and that's the whole thing SwiftUI is trying to solve.
Right.
Is,
And I think that actually
time-based things.
gets at a really interesting way of thinking about problems like this sometimes. It's kind of a reductio ad absurdum. It's like, oh, actually, we can't have a distributed decision-making process about which window's on top, right? There has to be some source of truth for what layering we're doing there. And if it's just all the different pieces of code can say, no, now it's me, that's a bug waiting to happen.
Yep.
And so think about whether the design brief is right here. Maybe that's not the right way to design the app. Maybe, whatever you would present the full screen cover for should actually be
Just log
a
'em
more
in.
elegant flow, right? Maybe it is rewinding the navigation stack to some base view and then restoring that navigation when they log in. There's other ways to approach that problem. I'm not saying it's always wrong to present a full screen cover, but
It feels very
Think about it.
disruptive to the user.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in general, like for any of these things where you do need to drop down to UIKit for these sort of things, that is not like a bad thing. We build our frameworks with real interop in mind for exactly this reason, right? Like there are, cases that'll work better in one framework, better in the other. But if you find things that like you really want to accomplish in SwiftUI and you need to drop down to UIKit for them, file feedbacks about that. We want to hear like where you're running into those corners so we can ship some APIs to make them better.
Yep. Excellent. So this question is along a similar line. I think I'll start with you on this one, Anna. So the question is, what's the best way of building a pure SwiftUI custom control? And I think we'll come back to pure SwiftUI before we're done with this. But for now, let's take it at face value. A pure SwiftUI custom control, like a dropdown that can expand on top of other elements and be interacted with, but doesn't impact the layout of those other elements. So how can I go about building a custom control like that?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. So I think first, I would think about, does this need to be custom? Does this not need to be custom? Kind of like going back to what we were talking about, if there's a control that exists in UIKit or exists in AppKit and SwiftUI doesn't have it and you're considering building your own custom one in SwiftUI, I would probably think about using the framework interop and just using that UIKit or AppKit control, because then, you don't, if things change in the framework, this year we made some tweaks to the new design, you just get that for free and you don't have to then go and make updates in your app. But if you want to do that, that's definitely a very fun question. SwiftUI is definitely pretty compositional, and so you can kind of compose a lot of those building blocks to build really powerful things. I think one principle I would say that is good to think about here, because the question is kind of impacting the layout of other elements, is so the way that SwiftUI layout works is, the parent asks the child for its size, but it's kind of a proposal. The child can still decide, to draw bigger, to draw smaller, and it reports its size. So one thing that you can do here, and I would love a double check just to make sure, because this can get kind of complicated, but you can effectively, like, you get proposed a size, but you might, tell your child actually to draw a bit bigger than that. Hey, like, you're cool to draw this big, but then you tell your parent, I'm only this size. So, like, so you might be lying a little bit, but that means that, you can, like, lay outside of those bounds effectively and do an overlay that isn't going to affect the layout because you're just, reporting a stable size. But also you can use, like, SwiftUI overlays are kind of like a higher level convenience on top of that. So
Yeah, I'd go so far as to say that's not even like lying. That's kind of the intent of like SwiftUI's layout system, right? Is that parents propose sizes to children, and then the children get to look at the proposal and say, no, I'm actually this size, or I do fit in those bounds, and I'm going to go here. Or rather, I do fit in this size, I'm going to be this big, and then the parent can place.
There's one case where that can. Well, there may be more than one, but I know it's one case where that can get you into trouble. If you're drawing outside of your reported bounds or outside of the layout frame that you've been given, and you're in a scroll view, the system may remove your view from the view hierarchy because it thinks your layout bounds are off screen. Right. But you have a protuberance sticking out into the screen, and suddenly it disappears.
Yes.
And so
Renz will also talk about that.
It does.
Layout talk.
And so I learned that this year. It's good talk.
So that's even a gotcha with overlay too, because I was gonna go with overlay just because overlay, that you won't affect the surrounding layout. You're very isolated in that render. But also, to that point, if you're like overlaying a view big and your host view is small and it scrolls up off the screen, that's a tricky one.
Yeah.
I need to watch Renz's talk.
Yeah, you should. It's really good.
All these design talks that were really good this year.
And that's another reason to stick with custom controls. Like, there are all these interesting corner cases you have to consider. And so, maybe the drop-down menu should actually collapse when the view that's hosting it scrolls, right? Because the person's demonstrated intent not to interact with that because they're scrolling it away. Or maybe it should stay and they're trying to scroll it so they can see more information. It's like there are these really fine corners that you need to consider when you build your own custom controls.
Swipe actions are a really good example of this. The container for swipe actions is responsible for coordinating all of the various actions, and when you scroll, you'll notice that if you have if it's swiped basically, that it'll dismiss so that it's detecting that intent that you're scrolling away, and it's all those fine little details like you were saying.
Yeah.
And thank you for bringing up swipe actions because it is my favorite API that's new this year. And Stephen and Julia's What's New in SwiftUI talks about this. But previously you could apply swipe action modifier to rows in a list, but nowhere else in SwiftUI. And now you can make any container a container that supports swipe actions by putting swipe action container on it. I think it's a very literal name. And now you can add swipe actions there, which I think it's so much fun.
Before we move on fully, I do want to add one note, which is, some of the things we said are like, oh, use system standard controls, and I totally agree. But I also don't want to discourage people from making their own controls. Like, yes, it's complicated. There are a lot of things to consider. It's why it's a serious investment. But sometimes they can be like, the little touches of magic that like turn an app from like good to great. But I encourage you to think very critically when you're doing this. Like, am I adding like real value to the experience by designing this as a custom control, or is it better as system standard UI? Because using system standard UI means you get like an experience people are immediately familiar with. But if your app has a very specific case where you can do something more, then don't be afraid to drop down, get your hands dirty.
Yeah. And the other thing I bring up, and it's something that that Jason mentioned in our last panel. If there is a ability to add custom styles for that, reach for a custom style before you wrap a control and make a custom control, because you're going to get all the accessibility support and everything, and you're just controlling how it looks. And so that's a great way to approach sort of that style that you might want to go for, not to overload the term, I guess, while still, getting that, all the built-in behaviors that you would expect from a built-in control.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing that I thought was interesting about what he said in that was not only do you get that, but also you can use all of like the normal control initializers. So you don't have to create a million ones. Like that was a point, I feel like I just think styling is really cool because of the points you just mentioned, but also like that initializer benefit, not having to maintain it is really nice.
Yeah. How many initializers does Button have? A lot.
Many.
There's one fun thing I want to share about swipe actions in particular. The I don't know the technical term, but the small circle buttons that exist as you swipe it open. If you're using that outside, if you're using the swipe actions modifier, those can be any view now. So it's not just a label, it's not just a text, but you can. I wouldn't recommend it, but you can put a navigation split view in there, and it'll render. So you'll get something. You will get
Now
something.
we've lived up to SwiftUI After Dark.
You can also put more practical stuff in there, like your own. I don't know, custom view. It does again. It won't just be limited to
What
the
about a
label
UI
and the text.
window?
Isn't UI window a UI view subclass?
I mean,
Oh, no.
Dangerous experiments in
Dangerous
SwiftUI.
experiment. Don't return one from your view representable.
All right, I think we can take a couple more questions. We're getting near the end of our time. Stephen, I'm gonna direct this one to you. So it's well known, and thanks. We've done our good job of communicating. The breaking large SwiftUI views into smaller views benefits SwiftUI's performance. But how small should they be? And like, is there a best practice when we should make new struct views versus just adding at view builder computed properties?
right. So the way that I like to think about this is that breaking things into smaller views is not just about making smaller pieces. It's actually about isolating the pieces of data that are actually responsible for those views updating. So the example that I like to use is like, let's say that you have a view that has a header and some content and a footer, and the header could update independently, the content could update independently, same with the footer. You wouldn't want to be in a situation where the entire view is being invalidated and the body is running for everything when only one of those pieces of data changes. And so that's a case where it would make sense to maybe split that into 3 different views for, header, content, footer. If you're in a situation where the dependencies are kind of shared across everything, then splitting things up isn't really going to give you any benefit at all because you're doing the same amount of work. So like the way to think about it is that the goal is to, at the initialization point in a view body, to provide a boundary where SwiftUI can basically do its comparison and say, actually, there's nothing new here, so I don't need to actually do this work. And that's why using view builders as computed properties instead of views, you don't get that benefit because you're basically declaring the same thing as one giant view body.
Right, you're like taking your implementation and you're like moving it out of line, but it's functionally the same as if it's all
Right.
just combined into one, and so all the dependencies are still there.
Right.
Whereas like I love this question, so I just want to like even like summarize it for myself a little bit. That you want to like, if you can, break things into smaller groups of dependencies. So you could think of a view as like it runs as often as any of its inputs change, like any of the things you pass into it, bindings, environment, like whatever you read in body. When any of those things change, the entire thing is going to be reevaluated. And so if there's like one thing that changes all the time and 8 things that change very infrequently, and only a tiny part of your view body that changes based on that one thing that's changing frequently, if you can move that bit out, then when that frequent thing is changing and the original body doesn't need it anymore, then it won't run at all.
Right.
Now, if you like had to pass it through, then that body would still run because it's just being passed through. But
and
there's
that's
other ways to like jump
Right.
over.
That's a case where observable comes in handy because the
Yeah.
pointer to the observable doesn't change. And so it doesn't change the super view,
Right.
but the property that little tiny sub view is reading out does cause it to redraw. And so you can skip the big stuff up above and just do the little one.
Right.
And don't be afraid of having lots of views. Like views are structs, they're value types, they're cheap. We shouldn't be afraid of having lots of smaller pieces.
All right, we're nearing the end, but I wanted to get to this question. I think it might be a good closer for us. Sam, I'm going to start with you, and we'll just swing across the panel.
Okay.
Having used SwiftUI since day one, SwiftUI 1 maybe, the framework has truly come of age. Thank you. Looking back at the evolution from the early state and the navigation pain points to the mature declarative engine we use today, what are y'all most proud of?
Oh man, that's really tough. What am I most proud of? I would say it's a combination of 2 things. I think the first one is just like a smaller thing that I got to work on that I'm really proud of, which is the custom containers APIs. I talk about them a lot. And that's a very complicated thing to express that I think we managed to like distill down to its essence. I'm really like happy with how that turned out and how the cool things people have made with it. And then the other is more about the overall like shape of the framework. We've done a really good job of making sure that we think about things in terms of like a little bit like more semantic pieces rather than like, oh, this is going to appear in this specific way on the device, thinking, okay, what is the thing? Like a tab view. A tab view can either be the standard thing you've seen, or it can be like a paginating scroll view, but like ultimately they're the same pieces like data flow wise. And it's been really cool getting to like rethink like the platform's UI systems in terms of like this new way of thinking about them. Like how is their data flow arranged? And I'm really proud of the job we've done with putting the pieces together there.
Cool. Russell, do you have something?
Yeah, I'd quickly say that I'm most proud of how it's grown and how we've been able to use it more and more internally. As someone who's worked on like UIKit for a very long time, you could poke around inside of like UI navigation controller and the view debugger, and you would see that we're starting to use SwiftUI to build some of the new like core UI components that are used across all of the apps, even apps that are not been rebuilt using SwiftUI. And it's really nice to see it reach a level of maturity that we can use it in such broad systems.
Yeah. Nick?
I'm blanking. The only thing that's coming into my head is just like I'm just really proud of the team. A lot of people on the team have been around since day one, and a lot of people are newer, and it's just such a nice group of people and the way they think together, and I just love seeing people like laugh about horrible API things and
like tonight.
Yeah, it's like building that over some amount of years. It's just as hard as building the framework, and so that's something that I really like about it.
Nice, I love that.
I like how we've taken things that end up being suboptimal, like for instance Geometry Reader, figuring out the reasons why people are using them, and actually providing new APIs that solve those problems. Things like on geometry change, on scroll visibility change, all of these places where people would reach for something, like really figuring out those cases. I really like seeing that adaptation.
I think it's just been really cool to see over the course of, the years how like more of the lower level building blocks have been exposed to allow, people to be able to build their own custom things. Because I feel like some of the stuff that we get to use internally developing for SwiftUI are really cool. And it's cool to also give those tools to the broader world and see what people build.
Yeah.
Also, of course, now that we've all said this, like I'm sure all of us are thinking of like 10 better answers. And like they're just flooding into my mind. But hopefully that'll suffice.
We'll save those for the next group lab.
Exactly.
So we've reached the end of this one. And we're so thankful that you all joined us today and hope you found this helpful and maybe entertaining. A big thanks to our panelists and to all the folks working hard behind the scenes to make this happen this evening. If we didn't get to your questions, please visit the developer forums at developer.apple.com/forums to continue the discussion, and visit feedbackassistant.apple.com to file any bugs or feature requests and let us know about your use cases. Speaking of feedback, you should receive an email with the survey link to let us know about your experience with all of WWDC. We'd love to incorporate your feedback into future events. Again, thanks for joining us. I hope you have a great WWDC.